So we're 9 days into the Olympics, and I'm curious how many of you have been watching. Okay, so some of you I'm sure are watching swimming or maybe beach volleyball or basketball or the amazing women's gymnastic team, or who knows, perhaps you're watching some of the sports that get very, very little press but are kind of interesting to watch. But I want to just back up 9 days and get you to think about how the Olympics began. It began with a big, enormous opening ceremony that the host country, Brazil, put on, that a host country always puts something on. But there were speeches, there was the ceremonial raising of the Olympic flag, which we remember as the 5 interlocking rings. And then they put on this great show, this spectacle filled with music and dancing and technical brilliance that showcases the country's culture. So in this case, this year, they were spotlighting and celebrating the gift of the Amazon rainforest to the world. But more than just bragging, what they were also saying to all who are listening in is we really need to be good caretakers of the world wherever we are. We need to be caring for the environment. They always present some sort of message of hope and peace to rally around. There's the ceremonial lighting of the Olympic torch that marks the start of the games, and it'll remain lit for all 16 days. Of course, we remember there is this parade of nations and their athletes, and the TV, at least our TV, zooms in, especially on the American athletes. So you see Simone Biles and Kevin Durant and Venus and Serena Williams spotlighted for the U.S. as well as others. And then they tell some interesting stories about some of the athletes from the other nations as well. You've probably listened in on that. You know the story. A flag bearer from each country leads in each country, right? So Michael Phelps led in the United States. The guy who got a lot of press was the guy from Tonga, right? Guy from Tonga wore traditional garb, no top, oiled his top, became an instant internet sensation. And lastly, we remember the refugee team came in under the Olympic flag, which was probably the most moving and touching of all, and spotlighted these people who are forced to flee from their own homes, but spotlighted how far too many people in our world are forced to flee their countries of origin, and they're still in harm's way. But it's fair to say, don't you think, that at the focus of the opening ceremonies is on these elite athletes who are on the ground floor. Okay, the spotlight really zeroes in on them. These amazing, dedicated people who have poured their heart and soul into training. In some cases, they've sacrificed much. Some have gone into poverty in order to fulfill their dream. The crowd of spectators, though, at that opening ceremony, you realize they're pretty much in the dark. They're really not spotlighted whatsoever. The main drama is down on the ground where the athletes are. They're not the central focus, the fans. The book of Hebrews, which Jim read from this morning, though, it uses athletic imagery in chapters 11 and 12, and it kind of reminds us of the Olympic Games and the Olympic ceremonies. And we're sort of invited to use our imagination, is what Hebrews says. And imagine yourself parading into this enormous stadium, people like you and I, Christian people gathered from all over the world today who seek to run the race of faith in this world. And I think we need to be very loud and clear in saying that the race of faith is not a sprint, short, sweet, and it's done. The race of faith is an incredibly long, grueling, and joyful endurance race. As we imagine ourselves going into this vast, imaginary stadium, we imagine ourselves going to the center of the track on the field, and we might even imagine the lights, spotlight coming down on us and our story. But what Hebrews does is says, let's turn off all the lights down there. Turn off all the lights on these people arriving in this stadium. And instead, let's turn the lights on all the spectators, this elite group of spectators that encircles the stadium. And what Hebrews says is that we are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses, those who have gone before us, who have finished their race of faith, and yet they remain actively cheering us on if we truly listen. They are people we recognize who have triumphed in the faith, but they are also people who have experienced all the roller coaster of human emotions that you and I face. They have faced heartache. They have faced struggle as they faithfully tried to invest in the human experience in whatever day and age they found themselves, just like you and I invest ourselves in 2016. But so Hebrews says, let's take a look at who's up in the stands cheering you on. So throughout chapter 11, it says, up in the stands are people like Abraham and Sarah, who ventured into the unknown, simply trusting that God was going to be in the future as they took steps toward faith. And Abraham and Sarah are cheering people on whenever they walk toward God's preferred future and work toward God's preferred future. Up in the stands is Moses cheering us on whenever we take steps to help people, free people from oppression, or when we stand up to the bullies of the world, or when we simply go about the business of including people who are so often excluded. Moses is cheering us on. Up in the stands is our prophets who are cheering us on. These are the people who had the courage to stand up and speak truth, even if it was hard on them. And whenever we do the same, and whenever we summon up the prophetic courage to speak difficult words, they're cheering us on. Up in the stands are countless people who gave up personal comfort to follow Jesus and live by his ways. These are the countless people who said, first and foremost, my life is about blessing other people. And as I strive to do that first, I realize there's great joy at the same time. Whenever we do that, countless people are cheering us on. Up in the stands are people who gave their life and they died far too soon, but they stood up for the truth. People like martyrs like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who stood up during the Nazi regime, Martin Luther King Jr., or in the earliest days of the church, St. Stephen and all the early martyrs who stood up, and because of their witness, we are here today. Up in the stands are countless witnesses, including some of the people who made this church what it is today. People who have gone before us, who we remember, who cheer us on, like Pastor Dan Oravec, or Dot and John Haltewanger, or Lane Workingor, or Esther Groninger, or Dave Trumbull, or Diane Heath, or in recent days, Ed Wilhelm. And the list goes on and on. Those people who have been a part of this community are there cheering us on as we take steps of faith. Of course, each and every one of us probably has a beloved family member, or 10 or 20, but a number of people who were the real deal when it came to faith. Not perfect people. But ultimately, when we analyze their lives, we realize their lives were tilted far more toward grace and compassion and demonstrating God's embracing love rather than excluding others. And we give thanks that they cheer us on. The crowds, I hope you see, there's great crowds cheering us on, rooting for us. Whenever we do something for the kids of this church, whether it's VBS or a kids sermon, or we have an activity or something that reaches out to kids, just know, I know my grandma Ruth Sonnenberg is there cheering us on, as well as many, many people you can name as well who value the importance of ministry to children. And with all that, what Hebrews does is says, okay, now that you've seen some of the people who are cheering you on, let's turn the light off, return the light to the center of the field. And what Hebrews says is it's our job now to run with perseverance the journey of faith. Run with perseverance. Celebrate the fact that there are people surrounding you, even in this day and age, people in the church in the present day who encourage you to grow in your faith, to learn more what it means to follow Jesus, to reach out to the poor and the needy. We're so blessed to have people to do that. We celebrate the fact that we all recognize, I think, ultimately, that faith is not a sprint. The great people who understand what endurance is all about, you realize the only way you ever have endurance is practice it over and over and over, and you build up strength, and you just keep on practicing it day in and day out, over and over and over again. The faith is ongoing training. And realize in the grand scheme of things, the one who is cheering us on loudest and clearest is Jesus, who stands at the finish line waiting to embrace us. And he'll embrace us one day as he has all those who have gone before us. Amen.